Welcome back. Dialogue. Essential backbone of the game, it really is important. And we're going to make some branching dialogue system. Let's get right to it. Just for the sake of you understanding what we're aiming for, I'm going to show you the final product. Here is the final product. There's a dialogue that comes in. It's very plain, very simple. This is the skeleton for you to create something bigger and better. And trust me, you can, because this is the base of what I use, and my stuff is complex. You can choose options, it goes away, blah, blah, blah. It's pretty straightforward, and it's very easy to use once you get the hang of it. Alright. So, how should we start? Here's a blank project. All I did with the project was make the camera's background a nicer color to look at. That is all I did with the project. It's a 2D default project. Alright. The first thing that I'm going to do right here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a script inside of the folder here. So I'm just going to call this dialogue. And inside of this folder, I'm going to create a script called dialogue. Alright. Let this open up here quick. So, this might look a bit foreign or confusing. It's not really. You don't need to really be fazed by it, and I'll explain what each thing does. So let's first create an interface called dialogue section. Here's the thing: if you treat all of your dialogue section parts as the same thing, like when you talk to someone, you will either talk to them in a monologue. I'm dumbing this down too. I'm like stripping it down to its core. When you talk to someone, you're either talking to them in a monologue, like, "Hello, I am X, blah, blah, blah." Okay? You talk to them. Or you ask them a question maybe, or you give them a few options that they can go from. So, what's your preferred scripting language? That's a basic dialogue. Hello, how are you? And then you say fine or not fine. What's your favorite color, your favorite scripting language? So we're treating these all as the same thing. Since this is bare bones, I'm gonna have a string get speaker name, get speech contents, and if you've never worked with interfaces before, interfaces basically allow you to have scripts that they're like people. In the end, everyone's a person. Everyone's a person, but inside, maybe they have different interests, they have different jobs. So you would have a person as an interface and maybe a different jobs like, I don't know, construction worker, software engineer, and teacher are all different classes you create off of that. Anyway, the last thing is we're going to have a dialogue section, get next section, because we're always going to go to another section, right? So the first thing I'm going to create here, is a monologue, and this is pretty straightforward. It's a class in the class, so it's a class monologue, and it's going to derive from dialogue section. So this is a dialogue section in and of itself. Okay. This is a pretty straightforward class. Okay, it has a name, like the contents of the text, a dialogue section for the next section. And now here's where it gets kind of interesting. If you hit Control Dot, I do this in almost all my tutorials. You can autofill necessary components. You can autofill necessary code bits, and if I hit Enter, it will autofill this for me, so I can fill this in for myself. You can also type this in manually again, but right here I'm going to return next for the next section. Under the speaker name, I'm going to return the speaker name. Under the get speech contents, I'm going to return the content. Alright, pretty straightforward. The last thing we need on this to finish this class up is a constructor, so let's create one real quick. Sorry. We're going to take in a few variables. We're going to take in a string speaker name. We're going to default this to speaker name. We're going to default this to default speaker. We're going to put in content. I'm going to default this to there's nothing here. You should never see this in game, by the way. This is just for debugging purposes. It's basically, if this shows up, it means something went wrong. Alright, this is a really straightforward constructor. It literally populates the class with what you give it. It's not that deep. It is not that deep at all. So, what do we do next? Well, we have a monologue, which is very straightforward. What we're going to do next is we're going to have choices. Choices. Okay. So, we're going to create another class. I'm going to scroll down for you. Choices. This is also deriving of dialog section. It's going to have a public string speaker name. It's going to have a public string contents. It will have, and this is the part that is different, it has a public list of tuple, and the tuple is of a string to a dialog section. We're going to call these choices. It's going to give me an error. Well, you don't have tuple. That's because we need to be using system. Control dot enter, control dot, and then select, fill in the required, using, it will autofill, or you can just manually type using system up here. Okay, so we're going to, again, we're going to satisfy the interface right here, and we're going to return the contents here. We're going to return the speaker name here. And here's important, you're just going to return null, okay? You're just going to return null, because this is special. These are choices. All right. Okay. So we're going to create the constructor, and we're going to say string speaker name equals default speaker. Again, we're going to say string contents equals, there's nothing here, 3 dots, make a choice. You don't have to write exactly this, just literally just an example. It's like a default. All this means is if you don't put anything in here, it will just default to that. So, alright. I'm just adjusting some things here. Alright, so again, very simple. This.speaker name equals speaker name. This.contents equals contents. And finally, this.choices equals choices. Okay, it looks like we've gotten pretty good. We've got 2 very basic, understandable classes inside of a superclass right here, dialog. And the last thing we're going to do is for user-friendly, for user user-friendly purposes, user interface purposes, for you as the programmer, we're going to add two functions to the bottom of here. Public static tuple, and you'll understand what this is for, okay? String dialog section choice. This will allow you to easily make a choice and it just makes your life easier. It just makes it read easier in the program, etc., etc., etc. The other function is a public static list of tuple of string to dialog section. And it's going to be called choice list. Also, this is also for readability. The other thing is, this is how you create a params. You say params, which is short for parameters. And we're going to just have tuple of string to dialog section. And this is going to be an array. And I'm going to call this entries. Then, all you need to do is do this. List of tuple of string to dialog section. Results equals new list, and then it'll auto-populate it for you, hopefully. Results equals entries. Okay, so we're just going to convert it to a list. So for each tuple in entries, results.add tuple. It's just gonna populate a list. It's really not that complicated. Okay, so this is everything that goes in this class. This is the brains of our operation. All right, this is the brains of our operation when it comes to thinking about the dialogue interaction. All right, and you're gonna understand it's very easy to read when you're writing it out. So now that we've finished with this, how exactly are we going to end up displaying these? Okay, well, that's glad you asked. Very glad you asked. All right, I'm going to hop into the scene here, and we're going to have to do some creating. Okay, so if you want to always check out the project, link to the GitHub repository down below. Feel free to download, all right? Feel free to download. Feel free to compare your stuff. All right, so let's create some components. First thing is we're going to create a canvas. On this canvas, we're going to go to it and set, instead of constant pixel size on its canvas scaler, we're going to hit scale with screen size and make it 1920 by 1080. This is just going to make it scale with the screen. It's going to make it very easy to not have it be messed up. This is basic canvas etiquette 101 when you're creating canvas stuff. All right. On this dialog canvas, this canvas we're gonna name dialog canvas, by the way. Canvas. There we go. Under here, we're gonna create, and bear with me, we're gonna create a few things. The first thing is a panel. Under that panel, and make sure you import TextMesh Pro, because TextMesh Pro is amazing. We're gonna create two text objects. After it imports TextMesh Pro, I'm going to create two text objects right here. We're also going to create one empty object, and then we're going to also create a button, a TextMesh Pro button. Now everything is very crowded and not at all organized. So we're going to go ahead and start organizing this. I'm going to scale this down. Remember, if you hold a corner and hold Alt, it'll scale it down to the middle locally. I'm going to put this around here, okay? Now I'm going to just sort this stuff out. I'm going to call this panel dialog panel. I'm going to call this text speaker text. I'm going to call this text speaker contents. I'm going to call this game object dialog choice parent. I'm going to call this button proceed to next. And I'm going to call text under this button proceed to next text, just so we have it all organized. And I'm just going to organize these. So this is going to be the name, the person's name when they're talking. I'm going to center it. I'm going to put the text in the middle. I'm going to grab this Text Mesh Pro. I'm going to make it about this size. I think I like the look of this. This is fine. Maybe it should be a bit bigger, actually, just so it's very readable on the screen. And remember, when you actually make a game, this should look nice. Okay, make it look nice. Spend good. Remember, don't slack off on your dialogue panel. Okay, if it looks awful if you do, make sure to add some nice. Make some nice artwork for it, right? You want to make some nice artwork for it so that it doesn't look ugly. The last thing you want is for your thing to look ugly. Okay. And I just want to make it readable for the tutorial, so I'm going to make this around 50 maybe, 50 point font. And alright, so we've got our thing here. The last thing is this is important, by the way. You're going to want to maybe move this up and this is where our dialogue options are going to appear down here. Alright, so we've created our panel. Let's go ahead and select the dialogue canvas and add a component. To it, we're going to add dialogue manager, and this is going to be our manager. If it looks kind of familiar, it's because years and years ago, before I adapted this system, this used to be the Brackeys dialogue manager. So it may look, I don't think it looks very similar, but it may hint at it, if you will. Alright. Okay, so let's just make sure we're using TM Pro up here. Make sure you're using static dialogue, the class we just created, and make sure you're using system. Okay. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to say public dialogue section current section. Next, I'm going to create a Text Mesh Pro UGUI reference for the name text. I'm going to create a reference for the contents text. I'm going to put a header above it called text components for organization. I'm just going to dump every single variable we need. We're going to have a public game object, proceed conversation object. We're going to have a public game object, dialogue choice object, and we're going to create later a button that will spawn in. We're going to have a public transform parent choices 2. I'm going to put a header called dialogue choice. This is our dialogue choice manager. I'm going to have a public float canvas group fade time. This is for the basic fade we're going to add. I'm going to add a bool canvas group displaying. And remember, you want to make this look nice when it's your turn. Add an animator or something. Public canvas group dialogue canvas group. Perfect. I'm going to add another header. Always, make sure to add some headers. It looks nice. It looks very nice if you add headers. All right. Okay. Let's start from the basics. Let's add a start function, and let's create a function inside called initialize panel. All this is going to do is make the panel invisible, and we can auto-generate this with control dot. Dialog canvas group dot alpha equals 0. This is just so that it defaults to a blank It's just blank when it starts. Here, okay. Let's add a function under update called update canvas opacity. This is just going to say dialog canvas group dot alpha equals mathf.ler from dialog canvas group dot alpha to, and this is going to be a ternary function. So this is canvas group displaying. This is saying if our boolean is true, then we're going to be doing it to 1. Otherwise, we're going to be doing it to 0. And then we're going to be doing it at a speed of time.delta time times canvas group fade time. That is it. Not for the whole script, but for the canvas opacity, at least. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is, of course, let's create a start dialog function. And this will take a dialog section, start. Okay. This is going to say canvas group displaying equals true, just so that it fades in. Then we're going to clear all our options. We don't have this function yet, but in the future, if we have some options already displaying, we're going to go ahead and just clear them. We're going to set our current section to the start, and we're going to display dialog. In here, we have 2 functions that we do not have yet. Okay, let's first, I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to start by solving this problem. Display dialog. Okay, we need the display dialog function. So let's go ahead and populate it with first, if current section equals null, then we're just going to go ahead and end dialog and return. This is very, very similar to the Brackeys one. Under end dialog, we're just going to say canvas group displaying equals false, and we're going to say clear all options again. Okay, we seem to have this recurring clear all options which doesn't exist. That's fine, because that's exactly what we're going to do right now. I'm going to re-uncomment this stuff, control dot, and extract the method. Oops. This is going to be a simple find and destroy. Simple find and destroy. Game object array, current dialog options. And remember, we haven't made these options yet. We're going to just find objects with tag, and we can probably edit this later, but dialog choice. We're just going to find all the things with dialog choice. We're going to loop through them for each entry in current dialog options. We're just going to destroy the entry. All right. Okay. So, what do we do next? Well, we need a proceed to next function. So I'm going to go ahead and create the proceed to next function right here. This is the function that will be called to proceed to the next dialog. Okay. All right. So first I'm going to go back into my Unity, and I'm going to start populating to see what we have okay? I'm going to go ahead and set the name text to the speaker text, the contents to the contents, okay? I'm going to set this button. I'm going to set this button's function to look at the canvas. under Dialog Manager and hit Proceed to Next. This is not going to work yet, but we're just setting it up. I'm going to select the dialog panel, add a component called, Canvas Group, and I'm going to drag this dialog panel under the dialog canvas group entry here. Under Parent Choices 2, I'm going to drag dialog choice parent, and Proceed Conversation, I'm going to just select Proceed to Next, and I'm going to drag it over here. The last thing we need is this thing called dialog choice object. And now this is a prefab that we're going to go ahead and make before. We're going to go ahead and make this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an empty object right here. I'm going to put it under dialog choice parent. I'm going to set this to be in the 0, 0, 0. Just set it at 0, 0. Next, I'm going to name it dialog option parent. All right, pretty simple, pretty understandable. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to tag this as dialog choice, so it will be deleted. If you're a real pro and you really want to kind of get that efficiency going, you can probably pool these in an object pool, but I'm not going to do that because this is not supposed to be super complicated. All right, under this, we're going to make a script called dialog option display. Well, that creates itself right there. I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to create a UI panel underneath this. It's going to be very, very small. It's probably going to be 0, 0, but let's just make this around this size. It'll be snappier later. All we want to do right here is I'm going to name this dialog choice, and this is going to just be this is actually not a panel. I'm sorry. This is a button. A Text Mesh Pro button. This button will be X wide. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to just set it to be background and black, and I'm going to make it 50. I'm going to also do this with the dialog panel. I'm just going to make it 50 and black. I'm going to make this text say dialog choice text. I'm going to call this dialog choice, and I'm going to go ahead and make this text probably around 50-point font, maybe 40-point font. 45-point font looks better, and I'm going to make it white. All right. I'm also going to. It seems that I've made a mistake. Remember to create this empty underneath the dialog choice parent, so that it actually has a rect transform instead of the classic transform. Now it's going to behave way better. So sorry about that. That was a bit of a confusing bit. I also set this to stretch, by the way, just now. All right. Whew. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like as an option in the scene. Yeah. All right. So just to recap, we have a parent. And we have another empty under it called dialog option parent, and that has a button inside of it. This will have the dialog option display script on it. All right. Make sure we're on the right track here. All right. Okay. The last thing we're going to do is go here, say vertical layout group, set this child alignment to upper center as a default, and we can go ahead and collapse this and duplicate it a few times just to have some make spacing. All right. This looks like 10 spacing is the correct spacing for our project. Next, I'm going to take this dialog option parent and stick it as a prefab and delete it from the scene. All right. The last thing we're going to do is go under dialog canvas, scroll to here, and enter in our final field, which is dialog option parent is dragged into dialog choice object. Perfect. Okay. What about the dialog option display script? We've been bouncing around, so let's go ahead and fill the script in. It's really not that complicated. Let me look at my reference here. All right. Public, we're going to have a public text mesh pro UGUI. Remember to import using tmpro right here. We're going to go ahead and say content text. There are going to be only 3 variables actually. Public, and we're going to go ahead and say using static dialog again, because these are all relating to dialog. Dialog section leads to, and finally private dialog manager. The last thing is now we're going to make the start method. The start method is going to say manager equals find object of type dialog manager. And we're going to have a public void set display. It's going to take a string option text. It's going to take a dialog section, next dialog section. Inside of it, it's just going to say content text dot text equals option text, and leads to equals next dialog section. All right. Next is public void proceed on click. This is what's going to happen when you click the button. This is going to say if manager dot, and we don't have this property yet, but we will, displaying choices return Control K, Control D formats your document, by the way. We're just going to say manager dot current section equals leads to manager dot display dialog. Well, it looks like we have a few errors to clear up here, so let's go ahead and go in here. Display dialog seems to be private, so let's just go ahead and make that public to fix our error. And and it should clear up already here. The last thing we need to do is go down here to clear that other error, and let's go ahead and create some properties. These are all going to be private. This is say int index of current choice equals 0. We're going to say hide in inspector, public bool displaying choices, and a private bool options bin displayed. I'm going to go ahead and recheck back here, and it looks like bam, perfect. It's done. All this does is in the future it's going to check if we're setting these out. If you have an animation, this is more useful if you have an animation. All right. Okay. Next function we're going to add in dialog manager. It's going to be under here, and it's going to be public void reset display options flags. It's going to say options bin displayed equals true, displaying choices equals true, index of current choice equals 0. This will make more sense later. Next, we're going to make a public void display dialog options, And all right. Okay. We're gonna first check if this is, and I'm gonna explain type of. If it's not the type of choices dot is instance of type current section return. This says, hey, if we're not in a if we're not displaying some choices, if it's not a choices dialog, we're gonna ignore this. We're gonna just skip. We're gonna just not do anything, because why would we even care? Okay. Choices equals choices. Now we're casting two choices, current section. Okay, this is especially important because if you try to cast a monologue to choices, that's not going to really work. Okay, if we're displaying our choices, then we're going to go ahead and say if the index of the current choice is less than choices.choices.count. If we've still got choices to put out, then we're going to go ahead and say tuple of string to dialog section. Wow, this looks familiar, isn't it? It's because we messed with this a lot. Option equals choices dot choices of our index of our current choice. All right. Next, we're going to say game object s equals instantiate dialog choice object at vector3 dot 0 at quaternion dot identity s dot transform dot set parent to parent choices 2. We're instantiating the little button. We're parenting the button to that little the vertical layout group object, so it automatically places it where it should be. Dialog option display behavior equals s.getComponent dialog option display. Perfect. All right. Next, we're going to say option displayed behavior dot set display as option dot item 1 option dot item 2, and these are the items of tuple, which is a pair of two things. Index of current choice plus plus, and then finally else displaying choices equals false, which means we've finished displaying our choices. Okay, that was a lot. We're going to go ahead and come up here, and under our update, we're going to also call, prepare. Oh no, we're going to call display dialog options and we're going to also have another function that is called before, called prepare for option display. All right, let's create this function. I'm going to stick this function right under update canvas opacity. If the options have been displayed, we're going to return. If they're not, we're going to proceed and ask if type of, and we did this before, choices dot is instance of type current section. We're asking, is our current section a choice? We can actually make this into something that is a function, but I'm just going to keep it like this, and we're going to call reset display options flags. All right. Okay. This script, it's getting a bit long, but that's fine. That's perfectly fine. We're going to go ahead and... What are we going to do under proceed to next? Okay, this is the last bit we're going to be doing. If we're displaying our choices, then we're just going to return. Otherwise, if our current section dot get next section does not equal null, then we're going to go ahead and set our current section to our current section dot our get next section, and we're going to display dialog. Otherwise, we're going to end the dialog. Alright. Under display dialog, we're going to go in here and say bool is monologue, so we can check if it's a monologue, equals, and again, that same function, type of monologue instead of choices this time, dot is instance of type, and you guessed it, current section, proceed conversation object dot set active is monologue. So we're gonna set that little next button to whether it's a monologue or not. We're gonna clear all our options, and we're gonna display the text. Display text isn't a function we've made, so let's go ahead and implement it. Display text says options been displayed equals false. Name text.text equals current section.get speaker name. Contents text.text equals current section.get speech contents. That is our entire dialog manager script. Let's tie up the loose ends. We're going to go ahead and go out here. I remember specifically we didn't actually remember to set some of the variables here, so I'm going to go ahead and drag this into the content text. I'm going to select this button, hit the plus on click. I'm going to drag dialog option parent onto it. I'm going to hit dialog option display and say proceed on click. Oops, looks like I misclicked there. Okay. Next, we're going to just check if all our stuff is set up here. And we hopefully have completed our dialog manager. Now, your question is, how do we use this? That is where Jonathan comes in. And now you're like, what? Who's Jonathan? What the heck? Well, Jonathan is our test object. I'm just going to create a new object and call it him Jonathan. Up here, and I'm going to add a Jonathan script to him. Now remember, every time you want to have some sort of dialogue, you're going to have a new script, you're going to have some sort of callback to a dialogue section. This may be confusing, but I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent, but this tangent is important, alright? This is a sign for you to start using code. Okay, beginning of tangent. Every person that uses Unity will look at the inspector, at least in the beginning of their Unity development journey, and love their inspector. The inspector is pretty amazing. You have a pretty user-friendly way of entering X, Y, and Z. In the Brackeys dialog tutorial, the entire dialogue is set through the inspector. But listen to me right now. Please get used to using more script. This allows you to do more, have more organization, have more usability for all this stuff. So, now that you've created your Jonathan class, what you're going to want to do is simply enable using static dialog, like pretty much every other class in this project. And here I'm going to paste in a basic dialog and go step by step how to use it. Under your start method, this is just a debug, but this start method is when this line triggers the dialog. It finds the dialog manager and it starts the dialog and it takes in a function. Now this func tester, which I could just call conversation, is pretty simple. It returns a dialog section. And how does it work? Well, I say monologue A equals new monologue. I input a local name, which I keep up here so I can change it all at once. And I put in some text for what's going to go, and I put in the next dialog section. Remember, both of these are dialog sections, so you can return basically anything. So, what does this do? It returns A, so it says monologue. So it says monologue A equals blah, blah, blah. Choices B equals, and then it says the name, how are you today, and it asks you fine or not so fine. Alright, and then it has some endings here, and if you don't put anything, it will just terminate the dialogue. Coming back here, we can change one more little formatting thing for the dialogue option. Make it center, hit play, and when it starts, it'll immediately say, good morning, I'm Jonathan. How are you today? Fine, not so fine. If you hit fine, it says, that's nice to hear. Have a nice day. Now, one little thing that it's not doing is it's not clearing the options after we click them. So we can just check here, and it looks like it's because we didn't tag our dialog option parent. It's because we had that little error because we didn't create one with the rect transform. So we click this, how are you today? Fine, they disappear, that's nice to hear, have a nice day. So we're smoothing things out, we're smoothing the last things out. Let's hit play again, and let's go into the scene. Let's actually proceed the dialogue until we have some options here. And it looks like our stuff isn't really sizing correctly. That's very easy to fix. All you need to do is go in here and maybe resize the elements. Just resize the elements. And this is like for you to mess around, really. We can actually do this. It'll say it looks okay right here, but sometimes it's just really it's really difficult. If you look here, if you look at this, the rect transform, while we're in the scene, see scale 1.4. It looks like the scale is just being corrupted. That's a very simple fix. We just go into the dialog manager. We find where we instantiate each of these. All right. s.transform dot the s.get component rect transform dot local scale equals vector3.1. This should just reset its transform to what it was before. Let's hit play. Looks like it's perfect. All you need to do now is pretty much just fix the spacing, which is right there. It looks like it should be -87. Perfect. Dialog system, branching. Alright, it has come to the end of the video. I'm sorry if there were any bumps in the middle. This is a really long tutorial. I had to get a few takes in for some sections, so that's that. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check the GitHub repository if you've got any, like, oh, what's going on? Why is this not working for me? Yeah, so that's pretty much it. You know, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. You've come to the end of the video, and I hope you do successfully make a dialogue system that is nice for you. And remember, this is a skeleton. I say this in a lot of my tutorials, but this is a skeleton of something that you can put some meat on it. You can put some organs on it, in it, more like. You can put some skin, and you can make it look nice. You can make it look nice. Dress it up. So, remember, this is the base for something bigger and better. And if you look at any of my games, my dialogue system, this is like a stripped down version of my dialogue system. So, thanks for watching. Have a fantastic day.